Walk through any medieval town that still stands and, well, you are confronted with an uncomfortable truth for modern builders. Timber frames from the 13th and 14th centuries are still carrying roofs, resisting rain and surviving freeze and thaw cycles that honestly destroy modern wood in just a fraction of the time. This was not luck, and it was not superior trees alone. Medieval builders followed a system that treated wood as a vulnerable but manageable material. Once you understand that system, rot stops being a mystery and, becomes a predictable failure that can be prevented. Stay with this explanation, because the techniques medieval craftsmen relied on are still usable today, even at a backyard scale. Why did medieval builders assume decay was inevitable unless prevented? Well, medieval people lived with wood daily. Houses, barns, bridges, carts and tools all depended on it. They understood that fungi, insects and moisture were always present. Instead of trusting wood to survive on its own, they assumed it would fail unless actively managed. This assumption shaped every decision they made. Wood preservation was not a product applied at the end. It was a process that began before the tree was cut and continued through construction and maintenance. So, let's talk about how timing the harvest reduced rot before it even started. Medieval woodcutters, they really paid attention to the seasons. Trees were commonly felled in late autumn or winter, when sap levels were lowest. Sap contains sugars and nutrients that fungi depend on, right? By cutting trees when these resources were reduced, builders made the wood naturally less attractive to decay organisms. To apply this today, well, you should select lumber cut during dormant seasons when possible, and definitely avoid green wood for any structure exposed to weather. Now, here's why slow seasoning mattered more than speed or convenience. Freshly cut wood was never rushed into use. Medieval timber was stacked carefully, raised off the ground, and protected from direct rain while still remaining open to airflow. This slow seasoning process allowed internal moisture to leave evenly, reducing those deep cracks that trap water later on. Right, so cracks are rot's entry point. Medieval builders learned that patience during drying prevented, decades of decay. Modern builders can actually replicate this by air-drying wood properly, instead of relying entirely on fast kiln processes for exterior use. Here's the thing. Surface treatments worked because they did not trap moisture. Medieval builders did treat wood, but they avoided anything that sealed it completely, you see. Lime wash, pine tar, animal fats and plant oils were used, but only selectively and quite thinly. These substances, they slowed water absorption without stopping evaporation. This balance really mattered. Wood that absorbs water slowly but releases it quickly survives repeated wetting, But wood that traps moisture, it rots from within. So, to apply this today, you should use breathable finishes and, avoid those thick films that just create a false sense of protection. Now, why was charring wood considered a controlled preservation technique rather than just some crude hack? Well, light surface charring was actually practiced across Europe. By exposing wood briefly to flame, folks closed up the surface pores, killed off fungal spores, and made the outer layer a lot less attractive to insects. After that, the charred layer would be brushed clean, leaving behind a hardened, water-resistant surface. This technique worked because it changed the wood itself, instead of just slapping on a coating. For modern use, controlled charring followed by oiling can, honestly, dramatically increase resistance on posts, beams and siding, all without using chemicals. So, how did medieval design keep wood dry without relying on sealants? Well, medieval buildings were actually designed to shed water aggressively. Roofs were, built steep, and eaves extended far beyond the walls. Timber almost never touched bare earth. Posts rested on stone pads, floors were raised, and drainage was always intentional. These choices ensured that even during long periods of rain, wood dried quickly once the weather cleared. But, you see, modern builders often reverse this logic, sealing wood tightly while allowing water to collect where it just cannot escape. Applying medieval logic today means, lifting wood off the soil, increasing overhangs, and making sure that every surface encourages water to leave rather than linger. So, why did joinery matter more than fasteners, you might wonder? Rather than relying heavily on iron nails, medieval builders used joinery techniques that let the wood move naturally. Mortise and tenon joints, wooden pegs and wedge connections would expand and contract with changes in humidity, allowing the whole structure to breathe and flex with the seasons. You see, metal fasteners can create cold points that attract condensation, which often leads to hidden rot. Wood joinery, on the other hand, avoided this problem while still maintaining strength. Even today, if you design joints that can breathe and drain, it can, dramatically extend the lifespan of the structure. Now, here's something interesting. Repetition actually strengthened medieval wood instead of weakening it. When wood is allowed to fully dry after each wetting, its fibres stabilize over time. Medieval structures were purposely built with this cycle in mind. Rain was expected, of course, but so was drying. That balance made all the difference. Over the decades, timber actually hardens, rather than softening, But with modern sealed systems, this whole cycle gets interrupted. Instead of letting timber breathe, these systems can turn the odd bit of moisture into, permanent damage. Now, you might be wondering why all this still matters for modern builders and, survivalists. The thing is, medieval wood lasted because it was allowed to behave like wood. Builders back then reduced the food sources for rot, controlled how moisture moved and designed things so they could dry out properly. The same principles work anywhere, whether you're restoring an old building, putting up a shed, or, say, preparing structures off-grid to last a good long while. You don't actually need chemicals. What you really need is understanding. So, if this deep dive into medieval wood preservation has added real value to your knowledge, go ahead and subscribe to Backyard Wisdom for more practical history that honestly still solves modern problems. And share this guide with anyone who works with wood and wants it to last for generations, not just a few seasons.